Hello, people. I have been fielding requests from followers pleading with me to please fire up the old live stream because they are suffering from extreme quarantine boredom. And so I'm happy to oblige. Happy to make your isolation at least marginally more tolerable. Although, if you're somebody whose enjoyment of life is really that much increased by viewing me on YouTube, then you probably got other problems. Um, in all honesty, my daily routine has not been disrupted that much, really, by the craziness that we're now living under. I work from home most of the time, unless I'm out and about someplace for a specific reason. My work can all essentially be done over the computer and the phone. And so, this is not that out of the ordinary for me. Really, there's a way in which life is actually slightly more convenient now because in the place I live, the parking regulations have been lifted. So I don't have to move my car, which is parked out on the street. So, ironically, things are actually, incrementally more convenient for me in that sense. Although obviously, I'm being extra paranoid, and I'm not going outside at all if I don't have to. I'm actually considering ordering like an elliptical machine or a treadmill or a stationary bike or something to just bring it to my dwelling here so I can get uh, exercise without leaving. Because I'm assuming that we're all going to be holed up in our residences for quite some time, especially here in the New York City metropolitan area, which is looking more and more like it's going to be the epicenter for the coronavirus outbreak in perhaps the entire United States. And I was getting reports from a friend in Brooklyn who's saying that he's out on a cautious walk, meaning he's walking around and trying to maintain proper social distance from others, and he's walking past Sunset Park in Brooklyn, and people are just lounging around. They're hugging. They're playing basketball. They're playing volleyball. They're packed in there. And just like, do you people not get it yet? This is going to be really bad in New York City in particular, and I'm assuming it's going to have spillover effects for the entire region. New York City hospitals are already on the verge of being completely overwhelmed, and they're saying we're not going to reach the peak in a month and a half to 2 months. As somebody just mentioned in a comment, yeah, 40% of the known cases in the U.S. are in New York City alone. The data that we're dealing with in terms of testing and the prevalence of the disease is very dicey, but if we're going to limit it to reported cases, that is true for New York City. So, especially if you live in New York City, figure out a plan here. Or even if you live like me in the surrounding area. I mean, I effectively do live in New York City. It's, Jersey City is kind of the sixth borough in a way. So I am operating under the assumption that it's going to get exponentially worse, and that New York City could turn into a Lombardy in Italy or a Wuhan. Especially because people are still out and about frolicking in the park. I mean, you got to be kidding me. And if you are a younger person who thinks that you have nothing to worry about from coronavirus, I would direct your attention, please, to a report today in the Wall Street Journal, which says that at a particular medical center in Queens, Let me quote it to you. Several coronavirus patients under 40, including a few in their 20s, are currently on ventilators in the intensive care unit. And all were healthy before getting the virus, according to the doctor there. So, yeah, is it going to be extra dangerous for people who are older, who have comorbidities, etc.? Sure, but it doesn't mean you should be lackadaisical about getting the virus. This virus is still barely understood. I don't want to be infected with a barely understood virus that has no vaccine, there's no cure. We have no real sense of the long-term impact, even of people who seemingly recover. There have been reports that you could have permanent respiratory damage from it. So, this is not something to be taken lightly, people. Okay? And I get the skeptical impulse. I shared it for some time, at least earlier on, when I wasn't really paying that much attention to coronavirus, and I really ought to have been paying close attention. So I take responsibility for that. You know, I was sort of myopically fixated on the Democratic primary race, on impeachment, on all that kind of stuff, and it really should have been more apparent to me that I should be devoting more energy to tracing this as it was developing in China. But I wasn't really, and because it was in part because of a skeptical instinct that I had that this could really be as catastrophic as a problem as some people were stating. Now, over time, I tended to agree more with the people who were making catastrophic proclamations, just because these were smart people. They weren't partisans. They weren't trying to take down Trump. They weren't operating with some kind of weird agenda. They were just trying to empirically assess the situation. And so then my perspective shifted. But I wasn't hyper focused on this, you know, a month ago, for sure. And you know, I take responsibility for that as somebody who has at least something of a public platform. I ought to have been more cognizant of it, but I just was not, because I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not somebody who's really immersed in the hard sciences. But anyway, it does have a potentially destructive impact on your health, even if you are young and seemingly healthy. So don't unnecessarily cause yourself to get exposed to this. I am not going outside right now. I don't care if people think that's paranoid. I don't care if people think that's excessive. That is my personal course of action right now. And I'd recommend that to others, especially if you are in one of these hotspot areas. The only time I've gone out in the past week was to get one food delivery pickup and to go out to my car and pick up some stuff. Thankfully, I have a great spot that I could have for like 3 months because I'm not driving anywhere. Yeah. So anyway, as I discussed yesterday, for some reason, the fallout from Tulsi's suspension of her campaign yesterday and her endorsement of Biden gets directed disproportionately to me. People like to take out their anger on me for anything regarding Tulsi, which is fine. I'm happy to absorb some of that hate because she has this like Zen-like quality where you could say the most vile thing about her and she generally doesn't take personal offense. But I do. Meaning I take personal offense on her behalf, which is why I unloaded yesterday on some of these Democratic Party hacks, partisan morons, who spent months and months and months just viciously maligning Tulsi, calling her every name under the sun. Oh, she's a Russian plant. She's a secret Republican. She loves Trump. She's a cult member. The list goes on. You know all the attacks. And then, remarkably, magically, Yesterday, she drops out and endorses Biden, and it's like nothing ever happened. Well, I remember all that crap, and that's why I unloaded on those people, and I used some strong profanity, and they deserved it. So, yeah, Neera Tanden, who runs the most influential progressive think tank in the country, who pulled that little charade yesterday with Tulsi. Yes, Charlotte Clymer, formerly Charles Clymer. I mean, I'm not even going to describe who that person is. Go look that person up if you'd really like, because it's just disgusting. Um, you don't get to wipe the record clean just because you think Tulsi's behaving like a good little Democrat. And by the way, even though she endorsed Biden, I do not in any way expect her to somehow relinquish all the critiques that she's previously had about the DNC, about how the party establishment operates, because those people all still hate her. It's not as though Tulsi's going to be like lovingly embraced by Biden world. She just made a judgment that the primary race is over. The question now is, do you want Biden or Trump? She wants Biden over Trump. She opposes Trump. I know people find that hard to believe because she goes on Fox News or she does online conservative media or she doesn't necessarily buy into every liberal orthodoxy. That means that she must be this stealth right winger. Well, the truth is she never was. Part of the reason why she chose to run for president to begin with, because she thought that she could present the most viable case for defeating Trump. All right? So it's not surprising to me that she, therefore, as a member of the Democratic Party for her entire life, who was running in the Democratic primary, decided to endorse the Democratic nominee in order to beat Trump. That's what she always said she was going to do. I know I've repeated this many times now. I even repeated it in an article that I wrote yesterday that was published at The Spectator, which I will link to in the description box. But she said this over and over again that this is what she would do. Now, this idea that she betrayed Bernie by endorsing Biden right now. No, because again, in her mind, she wasn't endorsing Biden over Bernie. In her mind, Bernie is no longer a candidate, which he's not. The Bernie campaign right now is not a campaign designed to enable Bernie Sanders to win the Democratic presidential nomination. That's gone. That's over. And even the rationale that was in place in 2016 for Bernie to continue all the way through till the final primaries and up into the convention, that rationale no longer exists either. Because in 2016, you had a couple different things that were different. Number one, you had the biggest state in the country that was last. California was on the final primary date. Or I actually think it was the second to last. I think District of Columbia was technically last, but it was like in June. And the Bernie campaign and Bernie himself thought that there was actually a reasonably good chance that he could win a surprising victory in California, get a big delegate haul, and maybe be in a position where he could possibly win at the convention over Hillary. Now, Bernie ended up losing California, but by a relatively respectable margin. And that's just not the case right now. California and Texas both on the same day, on Super Tuesday, because of the brilliant people who designed the primary process, which is like, it's not as though people sit in like the power brokers of the country sit in a room and decide, okay, here's how we're going to run the primary process. It's much more chaotic and random and incoherent of a process than that. But there's no like big prize waiting at the end of the process now for Bernie. It's all over. We had several huge states just this week, which Bernie lost by landslides. Florida, Illinois, and Arizona. The Florida margin alone wiped out Bernie's gains from the states that he did win, namely Nevada, by a significant margin. So, in Tulsi's view, the race is over. In any rational person's view, the race should be over, or at least regarded as over. I mean, if you're just like a Bernie cultist, and I'm sorry, there are those people out there. I know there are Tulsi cultists, there are cultists for Trump, there are cultists for everybody. But if you're just a straight up Bernie cultist, then I could understand how you would be unable to objectively analyze the situation and refuse to accept reality, which is that the race is over. Bernie's no longer competing for the Democratic nomination. The campaign is not even geared toward him winning the nomination anymore. It's designed for other purposes. You know, so he could just have like a presence, he could have a payroll, etc. So, but at the same time, given that he's no longer seeking to win the Democratic nomination, I think it's actually immoral for him to be continuing to solicit donations for the campaign. And I know that like when they're texting people to give money now, they're saying, well, please split your donations among these various coronavirus relief groups. But if you visit the Bernie campaign official website, there's still a giant donate button, a giant red donate button right there on the front of the homepage where you can click and give money just like you would have a month ago or 2 months ago or 6 months ago. So how can you continue to collect donations from working class people, from desperate people, from people of all stripes, under what are essentially deceitful auspices, in that Bernie's not even attempting to win the nomination at this point? And you saw that with his performance in the debate with Biden. Yeah, there was a moment or two where it got a little bit contentious, but it didn't even get anywhere near as contentious as he was with Hillary last time. It was just like two colleagues chatting amongst themselves. And his good friend Joe, that's what he refers to Biden as. So Bernie will almost certainly be endorsing Joe in the very near future. And I would, if you're a Bernie person in this chat, I would start reconciling yourself to that fact now. And then think of how you reacted in relation to Tulsi endorsing Biden, and consider whether you're going to apply that same indignation to Bernie. Because if not, maybe that's something you have to think on a little more deeply. Now, you could get a counter argument where people are going to say to me, oh, Tulsi didn't have a chance to win, yet she was soliciting donations and she was an active candidate for a long time. Well, yeah, but the point of the Tulsi candidacy was never because of some realistic expectation that she was going to win a majority of pledged delegates in the Democratic primary process. Now, did she want to do well? Did she think that devoting a lot of time and energy and money to New Hampshire could actually potentially give her a boost and at least keep her in the running, maybe? Yeah, that's what she thought. But it didn't work out that way for a variety of reasons. And she kept going this long because she thought that the campaign could be a vehicle for her to continue espousing her message. And the campaign has ceased to be a vehicle for that. It's getting overwhelmed by coronavirus. She felt that she needs to devote her full attention now to an emergency situation, which requires, again, her full attention in Congress and potentially even in the military, where her unit can be activated in the National Guard. And, she's not getting on the, she's been excluded from the debates arbitrarily. She's getting really, even as a candidate, she was getting relatively minor press coverage. So at a certain point, you have to, make an assessment as to whether continuing in a campaign format really serves your interest in terms of being able to amplify her message. Now, if there was no coronavirus, I do believe that she would have continued all the way through to the convention, just as she said she was going to. But you can't even hold town halls anymore. She can't hold events. She can't even circumvent the media blackout at this point. So yeah, It was time for it to be drawn to a close. And it was time to accept the reality of the Democratic primary process, for which there were many, many problems. And by the way, not this exit poll conspiracy bullcrap which people are constantly asking me to address. That's just garbage. It's people trying to get you worked up over nonsense so you ignore the structural reasons why Biden won the nomination. So you ignore the failings of the Bernie campaign, the failings of the media, the failings of the online Bernie community, which did a very poor job in actually providing an accurate depiction of the state of affairs in the Democratic Party and the country writ large, because they were so immersed in this mutually reinforcing echo chamber that actually got quite propagandistic, where they would always selectively put out polls that seemed to flatter their perceptions of how the race was transpiring. It was really destructive and almost, frankly, annoying. So these exit poll people who are telling you, oh, look at these discrepancies. There are no serious discrepancies. I've looked. You don't understand the methodology of exit polls if you're fixated on that crap. So please stop sending it to me. It's not real. And it's meant to divert your attention from where it needs to be focused in terms of truly understanding what went on in the Democratic primary. I'm going to be focusing a lot of my attention and energy on elucidating the reasons for why it turned out the way it did. I, almost a year ago, laid out some prognoses for how Biden could end up getting the nomination, given the ways in which the Democratic primary election had been traumatized by nonstop barrages of Trump hysteria about fake issues, which is destructive on many levels. Number one, Trump needs a rational critique for the real harms that he's causing, but he doesn't need a fake critique that is fueled by just mindless daily, even hourly or minutely, which is not a word, but you know what I mean, histrionics and hysteria and chronic exaggeration. Every single thing that Trump does is a crisis, right, in the minds of certain frenetic liberals and some progressives too, and really cool kid leftists. They feel the same way about Trump, where they're always declaring a state of emergency. And guess what? Now we're in a state of emergency, and you wonder why people didn't take your comments on that seriously initially. You're wondering why the people who are Trump sympathetic or even agnostic or apathetic say, oh, it's just more people trying to take down Trump. Because guess what? They were trying to take down Trump with nonsense for a long time. Russiagate, impeachment, concentration camps, Nazis, all that stuff was this just toxic confluence of sputtering hysteria that made people numb. It made them tune out. And even during the 2016 campaign, I was picking up on this. Where you'd go to I remember when I was in Philadelphia for the Democratic convention, I was at like a Chick-fil-A in sort of like a white working class area, and I was just chatting with the people there, and they would be like, yeah, I don't even like Trump that much, but the way that they attack him seems crazy. And it was. They were right. That's sort of my attitude, even though I have a little bit more of an in-depth understanding of things. Because I have the luxury and the time and the resources to delve more deeply into the nature of how these political dynamics coalesce. And so it was a problem in terms of the political psyche of the country. Given the political environment that had engendered up until now. I mean, remember, during the moment when we probably could have taken collective action to actually curb the spread of coronavirus to the United States, everybody was focused on impeachment, including Trump, including Democrats, including the media, including me. And that's, in hindsight, actually, I understood it at the time, but given coronavirus, in hindsight, the diversion of attentional resources away from coronavirus and to impeachment was almost like the culmination, a very grisly culmination of the distorted priorities that have been so prevalent through the Trump era. And Trump himself is even implicated in that in a way, because Trump refuses to distinguish between legitimate criticism and fake criticism. Or at least maybe he doesn't even have the ability to distinguish between those things. So remember, he did call criticism of his handling of coronavirus a hoax. This was on February 28th. And if you use the word hoax to describe coronavirus at that point, even if you're not literally saying that coronavirus is itself a hoax, meaning the virus is a hoax, that's not what he said. He said the criticisms of his administration's readiness was a hoax. But even if you use the word hoax in relation to coronavirus, obviously you're communicating to people that they don't need to take it seriously because it's all a bunch of baloney. So yeah, Trump does deserve serious, severe rebuke for his public communications around coronavirus. I don't want to hear any excuses or justifications for how him using the word hoax in relation to coronavirus in any respect was legitimate, because it was not. But anyway, Tulsi is not going to become some kind of mindless Democratic partisan just because she's stating her preference for Biden over Trump. Like I've mentioned, there are circumstances where I could envision my preference being Biden over Trump, to the point that I could theoretically vote for Biden over Trump. I'm not saying I will do that. We're a long way out. But I've always said I'm not voting for Trump. That's for damn sure. And I probably won't vote for Biden, but I'm not ruling it out. Because, hard to know with any degree of certainty whatsoever what the circumstances are going to be in November, given the insanity of what's going on right now. I mean, the economy is ground to a halt. 1 in 5 Americans now are under lockdown orders. Texas declared its first public health disaster statewide since 1901. And they're saying that they could enforce involuntary quarantines. So if you're in Texas and you are under investigation for having coronavirus, according to the public health disaster declaration that the governor put out, you could be involuntarily quarantined right now. Which means, I don't know, could the police show up and force you at gunpoint to stay in your house? Possibly. And so there are going to be a lot of civil liberties, major civil liberties concerns around how these lockdowns are enforced, around how these quarantines, etc., are enforced. And we have to be cognizant of that. And by the way, it's fine if I touch my face, because guess what? I'm in my apartment and I haven't even left today at all. I'm washing my hands, so I'm fine to touch my face. But yeah, I mean, this idea that Bernie should have been endorsed by Tulsi now, it makes no sense. Why would you endorse a candidacy that is defunct? I mean, only does that make any sense in the minds of people who are just genuinely Bernie cultists. And I'm not even trying to be derogatory. I like a lot of Bernie people. I like a lot of people who work on the campaign. I have an affinity for them. I voted for Bernie in 2016. There was a decent chance I might have even voted for him this time, depending on what the situation was in the New Jersey primary, if it was still competitive. But it's not. Competition's over. And, you know, Bernie's got a zombie campaign at this point. It's not even about there being no path to victory. It's that they're not even trying to achieve victory. So, yeah, I think he ought to suspend the campaign now and stop putting out a deceptive message to supporters about what you're attempting to do. He can still hold his coronavirus roundtables from his house in Burlington if he really wants, which he did tonight. You don't need an active campaign to do that. And by the way, I know people are saying, oh, we have to have a plan B scenario where if Joe Biden gets coronavirus, and drops dead, God forbid. I am not a huge fan of Biden, but I'm not wishing him to die, okay? But it is reasonable to say that, okay, Biden is 77 years old. He could contract coronavirus and he would be in the risk pool for somebody who would have a severe reaction to it. Got it. But that's not a justification for Bernie to stay active in the race, and here's why. If you understand how the primary process works, you know that once a candidate suspends their campaign, it's not the same as dissolving the campaign, right? So all the candidates so far, when they drop out, they suspend their campaigns. They don't dissolve the legal entity that is the campaign. So the campaign itself still exists. When you suspend the campaign, it means you're no longer operating as a campaign. You're no longer actively competing. So if Bernie were to suspend his campaign, he would retain all the delegates he's accumulated up until this point. And those delegates remain bound to him even after a suspension. So the relatively few delegates that Mayor Pete, Klobuchar, Warren, etc. have, even Bloomberg, those delegates are all bound to them still now, even though their campaigns have been suspended. And the same would apply to Bernie. So if there does have to be like a emergency scenario where Biden is physically incapacitated, Bernie would still have the next most amount of delegates. So he could reactivate his campaign. But I don't think you should be misleading people into thinking that you're actively campaigning for the nomination when you are not. And by the way, even if he suspends his campaign, he's still staying on all the ballots in the upcoming states. I don't know if they're even going to hold any more primaries. How could they? Any primary with an in-person component absolutely should not be held anytime soon. Maybe in the next 3 months. And, it's March. March to April, April to May, April to June. It's got to be over by June. They're saying the peak of this thing could be in May. You think it's going to be over by June? Trump said be prepared till August. So, very possible that there are no more in-person primaries. Can't imagine there'll be any more in-person events like rallies or anything. I mean, they should have shut down the rallies much sooner than they did. I think that, the rally that Bernie had, for example, ahead of the Michigan primary, probably incubated quite a bit of coronavirus. And then don't get me started on the in-person primaries that were held this past week in Illinois especially, where, you can blame that, at least in part, for the amount of coronavirus that's almost certainly now swirling around Illinois. There would be less of a threat in Illinois if not for that primary that was so recklessly held by Governor J.B. Pritzker, who's like a member of this family, wealthy family dynasty who bought his way into the governorship. And then just today, he declares, okay, we're doing a shelter-in-place order for Illinois. Okay, so everybody's got a shelter in place, but you said 3 days ago they can go out and vote? Does that make any sense? No, he could, I don't know exactly what the legal implications are, but it seems at least intuitively true to me that he could be pursued for criminal negligence for that. For endangering the health and safety of Illinois voters. And there was no reason why that primary had to go forward. Ohio proved that they could postpone it, even at the last minute. So the Bernie campaign is not a real campaign at this point. I would anticipate that he's going to suspend and endorse Biden relatively soon. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's my strong sense, just given a variety of indicators, including his lack of zest. And he just looks forlorn and defeated, which, I mean, he has been. It's rough for Bernie. I mean, this is his last hurrah. And he was in a position to win. In fact, they had 4 years to figure out how he could win. So, to sort of circle back to the point about why it's not the case that Tulsi, in soliciting donations and having an acting campaign as of 2 weeks ago, was somehow being deceitful, was because nobody was giving to Tulsi 2 weeks ago thought that she was going to win a majority of delegates in the Democratic primary. They thought that her message was important and that they wanted to help her propound that message. Bernie always, I mean, the reason why people thought when they were giving to Bernie that they were helping him win the nomination. And that's no longer the case. So it's totally different. It's apples and oranges regarding Bernie versus Tulsi and the reasons why people would be supporting their campaigns. I mean, if you're giving money to Bernie now, you're not giving him money exclusively as just a message candidate, or I would think not. And if you are, then that's a bad use of your money because there are widespread allegations of financial mismanagement within the campaign that I personally have heard and will be putting out in due course. And it's really bad. Okay? It's actually infuriating. So be on the lookout for that. It's all coming out. Mark my words. So I am not going to sit around and just pretend like it's at all justified to be acting as though it's a legitimate campaign at this point. And you guys can speculate all you want wildly about Tulsi's motives or like whatever sinister calculation you think that she has. I'm telling you that it's not as though she's ever going to be embraced by the Democratic establishment or Biden world just because she endorsed a Democratic nominee. That's not how it works. I mean, it was a wonder that Biden's handlers even permitted him to put out a polite tweet thanking her yesterday for the endorsement. So if you're saying she's sold out to what? What does she gain? If anything, she made a lot of her supporters angry because they're not able to objectively look at the situation right now, which is understandable. I mean, I get why, if you're really emotionally invested, you didn't take her seriously when she said she was going to endorse the Democratic nominee. You thought that she wanted to blow up the Democratic Party or run as a third party. If you believed all that, I can understand why the headline "Tulsi Gabbard endorses Joe Biden" would take you by shock, even though it shouldn't have been shocking. I mean, I described it maybe as a little jarring because it's just like, okay, wow, but it wasn't a surprise. But this does not mean that she's all of a sudden going to abandon all her principles and stop critiquing the things that she's long critiqued. In fact, if you think about it, right now she actually has a little bit more influence to make her criticisms because she's not going to be badgered constantly with speculation about, oh, is she going to run third party? Is she going to do this? Is she going to do that? No, and now she's welcome back as a legitimate Democrat in a way by at least elements of the party, that she's a little bit more of a space in a way to actually make her critique. And I'm not saying you can't criticize her for endorsing Joe Biden. That's fine. I'm just saying it's consistent with what she always said she was going to do. And it will, in a way, enable her to spread her message more so than if she had just been continuing on the course that she had been before yesterday in a campaign that didn't exist really anymore because of coronavirus, and where she had already been almost entirely marginalized. Okay, I'm gonna check through my super chats here. Let us see. Um, my problem is when I scroll through them, the super chats don't easily show up for some reason. And I don't know why. Hmm. Yeah, if you gave a super chat and I missed it, I apologize. Like I've said before, I'm on my phone right now, and I've got my computer here, and the super chats are not showing up to me at the moment. Um, so I apologize for that. If you gave me a super chat and I missed it, message me or whatever, something, and I'll try to address whatever it is you want to. Or if you feel like you want to do it again right now, I'll address it. Um, but yeah, I'm not a tech wizard. Somebody says Michael Tracy of the Teenage Mutant Crypto Fascists. Yeah, that was so. I mean, people really have to be bored during quarantine if they're making like derogatory fan art about me or like anti-fan art. Uh, if you missed it, there was yesterday somebody like was circulating like a logo in the style of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where it was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but instead of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it said Michael Tracy Crypto Fascist. Like, all right, more power to you. Um, okay, people. Like I said, I apologize about the super chat snafu. I don't know. I guess I opened up my kind of secondary chat window too late here on my computer, so all the chats are sadly gone. Um, but I'll rectify that next time so I don't miss your super chats because they're very important, especially during this arduous time of quarantining and lockdowns and general craziness. Where's the analysis of the Bill Weld campaign? Not much to analyze. He did suspend, actually, though, because I guess Trump technically clinched the Republican nomination. Just like, really? That's when you choose to drop out Bill Weld? I mean, for people who don't know, Bill Weld was actually the Republican challenger in the Republican primary for Trump. Previously ran as the Libertarian vice presidential nominee in 2016 with Gary Johnson. Just sort of a pointless campaign. All right, you guys, have a good night. Stay sanitary. Don't go outside if you don't have to. Tell your parents and uncles and aunts and older acquaintances that they ought not to go outside either, because a significant percentage of them still don't believe that this is the real deal, I think. Um, Sadly, for a lot of people, it really will not register them to them as being the real deal until either a very well-known celebrity not only contracts coronavirus but dies from it, or a close relative or friend contracts it. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of denialism, and I'm okay with being skeptical of the proportionality of it, of the civil liberties implications of all these drastic governmental actions that have been taken, but I'm not okay with needlessly subjecting yourself to health risks or subjecting others. I mean, look at the situation in Italy now. It is absolutely atrocious. What was the amount of deaths in the past 24 hours? I'm trying to find it now. Um, do. 627 deaths in Italy in 24 hours. Unbelievable. Somebody asks me, would you interview Chomsky or who's your dream interview? Yeah, I mean, of course I would. I've corresponded with Chomsky over email. Um, but haven't done a full interview with him, which, maybe I will at some point. Um, and I've thought about it. I mean, he's sort of on my list. Dream interview? I'm trying to think. Um, hmm. Well, I don't really have a dream interview. I guess Donald Trump. That's my dream interview right now. Imagine that. Imagine Donald on my live stream. Somebody says Robert Mueller. Yeah, that's a good one. That actually is a really good idea. Robert Mueller and Donald Trump. Those are my dream interviews. So maybe they'll do a podcast or a live stream. I guess the really big interview to get now would be Dr. Fauci or whatever his name is. I mean, that guy on his current course is going to be, he's going to replace George Washington on the dollar bill or something. People asking what's going on outside. I guess you could hear that. I don't know. Vehicles moving around. Random ambient noise. Because I have my window cracked open. Yeah. All right. Like I said, stay hygienic, stay sanitary, stay sane, stay on YouTube, stay on Twitter. Whatever the downsides of these online media that we're all at least semi addicted to, at least it means that we can't be 100% isolated in unbelievable times like this. And we can have social interactions, which would not have been possible maybe even 15 years ago, at least in the same way. So, got to look on the bright side of things, I guess, to some extent. Or not. Because it's kind of a terrible situation right now, so maybe there's no bright side. All right, goodbye.